John and Kathy lived in a cozy home in Dallas, enjoying a quiet family life. Their days passed quietly, but the smell of change was in the air. They were looking for a new place to live, anticipating a new chapter in their lives. Kathy, as she always did before moving, hid a note to herself in the house, a small ritual in case fate brought her back. He, a talented musician, spent his days working and browsing real estate listings at the same time, though it was obvious that his soul was in no hurry to leave the place. Kathy, on the other hand, was eagerly preparing to move. In the evening, when the town had already fallen into slumber, something rumbled downstairs. They went downstairs and discovered a piano left behind by the previous owners. They returned to the bedroom and drowned in each other, forgetting their worries. The next day, John was in a car accident. His body lay motionless behind the wheel. At the hospital, Kathy silently followed the doctor into the room where her husband lay under a white sheet. She stood looking at him, ran her trembling fingers over the bedspread, and then walked out without turning around. During the night, John's ghost rose. He felt nothing. Wandering the hospital corridors, he tried to figure out why he was still here. People passed by without noticing him, and ahead a door opened, leading into a bright light. He looked up at it, but didn't take a step. The door had closed. Now all he wanted to do was go back to his house. He slipped inside and looked around the familiar walls. There was a picture of him and Kathy on the kitchen table, and a figure flashed outside the window. It was Linda, their realtor. After she left, Kathy entered the house. She looked haggard, her steps were slow and her shoulders slumped. John watched her mechanically send pieces into her mouth, but there was not an ounce of pleasure in her movements. She ate each bite with desperation, as if hoping to fill the emptiness inside her. Then she hurried to the bathroom and the house was silent again. Katie climbed onto the bed, clutched at the sheets and pressed them to her face, inhaling the remnants of her husband's scent. John, desperate to comfort her, gently touched her shoulder. But he was only a ghost. His touch had no weight, no warmth. She couldn't feel him. At night, as the rain pounded softly on the roof, Kathy slept and John sat silently by the window. He cast a glance at the neighboring house. There, in the darkness, another ghost lurked behind the curtains. The ghost slowly raised his hand and waved. Days went by. Kathy tried to move on with her life. One evening, as John sat in the living room, she didn't return alone. He touched her, she responded to his kisses. John shrank with jealousy, an incomprehensible rage boiling up inside him. He turned on the light, plunging the room into darkness. Books tumbled from the shelves. Katie shuddered, picked one up and turned a random page. Her gaze came across a sentence similar to his. The next morning, Katie made a decision. She decided to move to start a new life. John followed her everywhere, but she didn't notice him. Before she left, she took out a note, wrote something short and hid it in a crack in the wall. The house was taking her goodbye message. John watched her go, taking with her their life, their love, their memories. Soon there were new tenants in the house, a family with children. The house filled with life, laughter, slamming doors. John watched their celebrations, the quiet evenings, the children playing. But with each passing day, something in him grew more restless. The children began to feel his presence. The boy began to wake up at night. One day, while looking at a family portrait, John knocked it off the wall with a clatter. The glass cracked, but the family only stood still for a moment and then continued their dinner. Then he picked up the glass of milk and slowly, with demonstrative violence, tossed it to the floor. The mother gave a startled sigh. The lights began to flicker, plates flew into the air. Panic gripped the house. She realized they were not welcome here and soon left the house. He returned to his crevice in the wall. Katie's note was there. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get it out of there. The neighbor's ghost still sat outside the window. He wasn't waving at him anymore. He just stared into the distance, waiting for someone he no longer remembered. Time passed. The house changed owners. This time the tenants were noisy. Parties, alcohol, laughter filled with emptiness. John moved among them like the wind in a forgotten house. Listening to theories about the Big Bang and the inevitable collapse of the universe, John suddenly realized that even the cosmos he had once called home was not eternal. His existence in this world had seemed endless, but now he realized that the end would come for everything, even him. The next occupant soon left the house, leaving it forever abandoned. Years passed, decades changed, and no one came. John was still trying to fumble for the note. It lay there, hidden in a crevice of the wall. Katie's last message. The last thread linking him to the past. And now, after countless years, at last his ghostly fingers grasped the thin sheet of paper. But at that moment, the iron machines crashed into the walls with a roar, tearing down everything in their path. John stood among the rubble, clutching the note in his hands. On the other side of the ruin stood the ghost of a neighbor. "There's nothing more for us to do here," he said quietly. A skyscraper stood in place of his house. John walked through the offices, gliding among the workers who didn't notice him. He observed their lives, their daily routine, but felt nothing for them. Climbing to the roof of a skyscraper, he looked out over the city. John walked to the edge of the roof and looked down. He stepped forward and found himself in an empty field. The world around him had changed. This was not his era. In the distance, people on a wagon were pulling up to the place where they were going to build their home. Soon the family was attacked. John could do nothing. He just watched as the people he had just seen alive and happy were killed. Their bodies were left lying in the open air. Years passed. Wind and time erased all traces of their existence. And then everything changed again. He stood in his house. He looked at himself, alive, young, full of hope. Kathy stood next to him and smiled at the real estate agent. Ghostly John watched his living self look around the house. He saw the moments when they were together, saw how Kathy wanted to leave and he wanted to stay. He saw the tension that grew between them. And he knew what would happen next. On the last night before his death, a lively John told Kathy he was ready to move out. Kathy had left, and now he was alone again. He went to the wall and pulled out a note. He unfolded it, but before he could read it, the note slipped from his fingers. It fell to the floor and disappeared. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and like the channel. See you soon.